All right, everyone, welcome to week 3 of HMNS 2710. Today we're going to expand on those theories, those few theories you read about today, and talk a little bit about culture. I have a fun video at the end, and then a more serious one at the beginning, but that's more about trauma. So let's see, what are we going to talk about today? So some course updates, then I want to review and recap the doll video, come back to that since we left it last week and I read your video essays. And then trauma, I want to talk about, well, I want to show a video on trauma and the developing brain. Then takeaways on theories and theorists. I'm not going to cover all of them because you weren't required to read all of them. I just want to give you kind of an idea of what is important about these different theories and theorists with relation to cultural competence and diversity. And then understanding ecological systems theory, because I think when we're talking about diversity and cultural competence and we're trying to support diverse populations, ecological systems theory is a very helpful tool if you apply it to clients or children to truly get the best picture of who you're working with. And then I found I want to start doing some fun video segments of diverse entertainers because I love entertainers. And this is not just about child development. And I know that the book is a child development book, but I want to make sure I'm expanding beyond just children because this is not, it's very clearly for human services. And I want to make sure that I'm, addressing everyone's needs. So course updates, just a few things. One, placement assignments. There were 2 orientations that should be completed by now. If you have not, then you need to see me, or not see me, but at least email me. Your internship placement confirmation is due on September 22nd. That is Friday. I will email Inspiring Minds today to make sure that they are on track. But if you are having issues, I've only heard from one student who attended an orientation and hasn't heard about placement yet. And that student, I'm so thankful, did that. If you attended the orientation and you haven't heard back, let me know. If you did not attend an orientation, you need to tell me ASAP. Or if you don't have a plan for attending an orientation, because that's a requirement for Inspiring Minds and for this course, okay? I need to get that out of the way because there's a very specific, your internship placement confirmation is part of your assignments. Next, weekly, you always have a discussion board and exit tickets, which also means you have a lecture. You are required to watch all of these. If we are not watching these, I'm going to start doing only chapter quizzes because it's not clear to me whether people are watching these lectures. When I'm looking at the views are very low. So watch the lectures, complete your discussion board and your exit tickets after, because typically I will give some direction on your discussion board or refer to it, and your exit ticket is how I know that people are watching my videos. Okay? And then lastly, I just wanted you to get the big dates, your chapter quizzes and reflections. Like I said, there's chapter 1 and 2, sorry. Your chapter 1 and 2 were combined. And then I decided because of what this course is about, I want you to do both reflections and quizzes, but either alternate or not. It's just look at the syllabus and you will see you have 3 quizzes and 4 reflections to do by that date. Similarly, you have 4 quizzes and 4 reflections to have done by November 8th. If you have issues, let me know. I know someone was concerned about the book. Didn't think we had a book. We do. It is through Pearson, but it is not a Pearson MyLab book because I'm not doing any activities in it. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that these are requirements for the course. This is how I grade. And if we're not doing our placements, you're not going to pass this course. If you're not completing discussion board and exit tickets, then I don't know that you're even participating. And then chapter quizzes and reflections are to help me know that you're reading the content. I know it's a book on early childhood development, but I very specifically picked sections that spoke directly to culture. Okay, so that's my update for today. Review and recap. And I kind of viewed that video as an example of systemic racism and implicit bias, these hidden prejudices that really come out from systems that elevate white faces and oppress Black and brown faces, sadly. And then we'll watch a video about trauma in the developing brain. I think it will help us understand why it's important to address or understand trauma in whatever field of human services you're in, because it's something we will see constantly. So some thoughts on the doll. These are what I took from your essays. The impact of media on developing minds is detrimental. Yes, preach is what I want to say. It's true. And it's so prevalent these days, and something we need to be aware of, where if our children are watching this entertainment where it's mostly elevating white faces and not doing the same for Black and brown faces, it's going to have lasting impacts. Even to this day, the majority of individuals in the public eye are not from an ethnic minority background, and it indirectly places a racist image. And that's what I just said in the student's head. It's changing, right? We see streaming services trying to elevate faces of different colors, trying to elevate creators too, right? But that doesn't change that there are still some people, I know these people, so I can speak to this, who struggle with that concept because they don't feel like it's real life. And I can understand that, but I also think that real life also isn't whitewashed, and it's been whitewashed for a long time. Beauty is not what society thinks it should be. Beautiful quote. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as they say. And I believe that to be true. And I believe that to me, it's almost like these children made associations, but weren't really interpreting the questions. But those associations, if you've ever heard of the implicit association test, that's where implicit bias and systemic racism continue to flourish, sadly. And then when they ask which doll looks like them, when the kids realized they were pointing at what looked bad, looked exactly like them, was gut-wrenching. And that's the truth. That someone asked which doll looked bad and then which doll looked like them, and those were the same answer. And there were definitely some changes in the temperament and disposition of those kids, which again is why this is not an experiment I would do. Likely not an experiment that you would see in the US, because we have protections against vulnerable populations in research, that even if this were done, there would have had to be some sort of counseling or after, post-experiment plan to support those children and ensure they didn't endure lasting negative impacts. But the video does show something that we wouldn't know if we didn't ask, and it is that these implicit biases begin so young. And that the brain, one of the students in another class said the brain is like a sponge. And it's true. The brain absorbs everything, and the brain tries to make sense of it. This is how those brains made sense of it in the world those children were living in. Something I also want to say, your responses were all so honest and valid. And what I wanted to make mention of is I don't know what everyone looks like in the class. I don't know what everyone's background is. And I do feel like if you are a person of color who watched this video, it might have been more difficult for you. If for no other reason than because it might have been a crisis of conflict of, wait, is this how, not maybe just a crisis of identity. Is that what I believe? Is that how I was raised? Or you could be a parent and suddenly be worrying, am I passing these same views onto my child? Am I passing the same lower self-esteem if you are a person of color to my child? Which is something to think about, but also it can be really difficult to think about in this context when you're not expecting it. And so I appreciate all of you watching the video. I don't think it was easy. I know many people shed tears over it. However, it does provide this just crystal clear perspective of what happens when children, of how children internalize messages from society. All right. And then this, I wish I had had a transition. Trauma in the developing brain. I really like this video. I think this video provides a nice visual of what happens when children endure trauma and how it impacts relationships slightly later in childhood and then later on in life. So let's check it out.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threat. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage.
I'm going to pause that for a second. You might also hear the term a person in survival. That's similar to vigilance. Being in this perpetual state of survival means, and they explain what you've adapted to survive, not thrive in your world. And she'll explain more, but that's just another term you might hear.
Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behaviour. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones. And everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behaviour that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stresses, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behaviour in a new light can mean we respond differently. But there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
So I like that video. Such a great explanation of how trauma affects us in our everyday lives. So again, trauma impacts three systems: threat, threat, memory, and reward, right? With memory, it kind of alters those positive memories and creates more salient, memorable negative memories, sadly. We see threat, we misinterpret actions of others, some perceiving non-threats as threat to our survival. Again, it sounds like an exaggeration, but it's actually true. Reward. If you were neglected and you weren't rewarded for responses to typical reinforcers, which we'll talk about, reinforcements, positive consequences, are atypical, right? And then we have this concept of latent vulnerability. This one is one I know very well because I believe this is what I suffered, in that I didn't know, or I wasn't sure of myself, and it became more clear as I got older, and I started to realize I didn't even have an identity. But it does mean that I had a lot of anxiety. I suffered my first major depression when I was 22. Nope, not true. When I was 18. Because, that, not surprisingly, grew up in a complex trauma situation as a child, and then went to college for the first time, was away from my family, had some traumatic events happen when I was there. And then after my first year, I was in major depression, but didn't even know it. I experienced that. Those are the types of things we see. And when I say major depression, here's my example. My aunt, my generous, kind aunt, knowing that my family at that time could not afford to really travel or bring us, had never really afforded to travel or bring us anywhere. Again, not complaining. This is just the situation. My aunt, having no children, brought me and my brother to Italy. And this was right after my freshman year of college. And I can honestly tell you, I did not like my experience, and I had no interest in being there at that time. Wish I could go back, wish I could do it over. But that was because I was in a major depression and I couldn't really enjoy things that other people were enjoying. And it's sad because I do think I know that my trauma is what led me to be vulnerable as a young adult. And really, when you're working with adults, if you are, what you work on at that point is forgiveness to yourself. Can I make amends to my aunt for the attitude I took on while I was in Italy with her? And then can I forgive myself for not being able to appreciate that experience? And I still struggle because I can't help but feel like I should have. So that's one example. Susceptibility to mental health issues. But really what it means is develop strong, compassionate, caring relationships with students and clients, but boundaries and consequences are still important. And that's the hard part, is just because someone's endured trauma, sometimes we think we can't put boundaries or consequences on them, but we have to. Because oftentimes, if it is some sort of mental illness, it can lead to increased symptom presentation if we're not offering those boundaries and consequences. Sometimes we can be brought into these ineffective or unsatisfying relationships. All right, next. Okay, so I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I could do something very simple as a little break for everyone? You don't even have to get up unless you want to, for my lecture. And I found this, and I think I will start doing this regularly. So this is my brain break for today.
Now we're going to work on our mental health with a focus activity called Pinky Thumb. What you're going to do is open your hands up like this. Make sure your palms are facing you. Close them into fist. We're going to put one thumb out on one hand, one pinky out on the other. And when I count to 3, we're going to switch. 1, 2, 3. Switch. Let's try again. 1, 2, 3. Switch. Now, some of you at home may be wondering, wow, this is more challenging than I expected. But guess what? Our brain loves challenges. And I want to break down what's happening in our brain as to why this activity is sort of challenging. So everybody put your fists like this, put them close together. This is about the size of your brain. And the way your brain works is that one half of your brain controls the opposite side of your body, which means the other half controls the other side. When we do 2 different things at the same time on each side of our body, we're working both halves of our brain. Our brain loves this. So that's why we incorporate these exercises. These are called neuroplasticity exercises. So let's try it one more time, but we'll break it down. Thumb out, pinky out, thumb in, pinky in. Thumb out, pinky out, thumb in, pinky in. As we get better, we'll go back to both out, both in, both out, both in, both out, both in, both out, both in. Great job. Keep practicing. Don't give up. I promise you'll get better and better as you keep going.
So I like that because I think it is important for us to have little brain breaks. Also, if you can see me, which my camera's on, so you should, but I'm not sure in my video you can't, so who knows. So I have arthritis in my right hand due to my stimming, which is because of my autism, or a characteristic of my autism is that I do engage in this stimulating, in this behavior when I'm overstimulated. And it's almost always when I'm extremely happy or satisfied with something. And so for me, if you know what stimming is, for if you've ever seen it before, which many have, it's common in autism. We've known it as hands flapping or rocking. For me, it started with kind of falling back in my chair and my hands wiggling the fingers. As I got older, I realized that wasn't really socially accepted. So I went to kind of crushing my right hand with my left hand. But the thing is, I can't really control it. It's completely unconscious. And because of that, I've really destroyed this part of my hand. And I can only use part of my pinky, which that's an aside, but hopefully you enjoyed that. There are more we'll do. All right, so theories and theorists, we're going to focus on just 2 today. So here are the 2 we're going to focus on. The one I had you read, Vygotsky, who is our sociocultural. I've also used social constructivist because when I was learning, we talked about how development, how a lot of what we learn is socially constructed. Terms that come out of Vygotsky: nonverbal, verbal thought, non-conceptual versus self-directed speech. The most important one that I will use ad nauseum is scaffold. As a teacher, it's something I use a lot. And it's really just what we do to guide children to the mastery of a new skill. So similar, now we are not covering Piaget or neo-Piagetians, neo-Piagetian theorists, but just so you know, those theorists believed they were holders of the cognitive developmental theory and focused a lot on intellectual or cognitive development, and specifically on thinking and language. Vygotsky believed these were important, but then also added this piece of social context. The reason I had you read this section is because of the importance placed on social context. Because our course, cultural competence and diversity skills, it's all about the social context. It's all about how the social context has created has led to the need for courses like this, where we talk about the implications of being a diverse individual or being an individual coming from a diverse background, how that can really impact someone. And something also important is independence. Though independence using more and more complex skills is critical to development, right? We want independence. Vygotsky argued if a child can complete a task independently, don't interfere. But what he also said is those tasks that child could complete with adult support are within that child's zone of proximal development. And scaffolding is the strategy we use so that children can reach or attain those skills and master those skills. Okay, those are the real important concepts of sociocultural theory, is kind of this social context, and then the importance of a teacher in providing scaffolding within the zone of proximal development. Does this theory explain atypical development? Not totally. Doesn't really count genetics, which we know many disabilities have a genetic predisposition. Does explain cultural deviations from developmental milestones. Within a very closed social context, yes, but it doesn't look at broader social context, which we'll get into in a second. And here we are with Bronfenbrenner. And Bronfenbrenner developed ecological systems theory. And this is where we bring ecology, the idea of ecology, into child development. And then our different systems, which are micro, meso, exo, and macro system. And the idea is we're going to look at that child and adolescent developing within this larger world, because we know that the larger world has such a great impact on that individual. And what Bronfenbrenner argued that other theorists had not was this greater societal context, looking at our government, looking at politics, looking at the economic conditions, looking at these social groups that the individual is part of. How is this child or individual identifying? These are all pieces that are critical to development under ecological systems theory. Now, what your book did not talk about, and why I haven't even asked the question yet, is the fifth system, which has since Bronfenbrenner talked about it, been expanded on, and it is the chronosystem. Here, patterning of environmental events and transitions over the life course. They can be socio-historical conditions. I did not include this in my own example. Actually, I forgot that I wanted my own example here. Oh, never mind. We'll have to do this. Sorry, Al. All right, let's see. Week 3, this is what I want. Okay. So now let's see if I can make this happen. So this is my ecological system. That's me and my cat. Microsystem. So what's in my microsystem? My stepkids, my partner, my own family. Although I'd say that's more relevant in the exosystem at this stage of my life, but for most people, their family, their immediate family. My job, CCRI. There's probably more to it, but these are things that are directly impacting me now, especially these two and this, because this is basically my life right now. The mesosystem is the interaction of these things. CCRI interacts with my stepkids because they want to come visit and they know that I'm at work. And they're like, where's, they call me Leggles, and they say, where's Leggles? Well, Leggles is at her job all the way in Rhode Island. So those interact with each other. And obviously my partner is currently interacting with my family over my upcoming birthday that he's planning. So that's an example of a mesosystem. Exosystem. These are the indirect influences. So here I have Rhode Island government and New Hampshire government and Goffstown, that's where I live in New Hampshire, local government. Those all impact my day-to-day, right? I have to register my car. I have to do that through my local government. I have to pay taxes. In truth, I don't really do that through my state government. I will have to do that through Rhode Island. New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax. New Hampshire does have property tax. That influences me indirectly because I live in a house, right? Then University of North Carolina, that's where I am finishing my PhD. There have been some recent events that happened there that indirectly affect me because I have friends there that I care about that I don't want to be hurt. And then my in-laws, obviously, less direct impact, but we do, my partner's mother cares for the kids pretty frequently. So she's very important in our lives. And then last is the macro system. And these are more the sociocultural influences. Mass media can go on the exosystem too, because I think it's kind of both cultural influence in just the emergence of social media, but also the influence on me directly as someone who uses Instagram. And then we have bigger ones like my own home culture of being part of the Merrimack Valley, which is the area, and you can't see it, but this is the Merrimack River, and it's between New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Oh, that's a flipped version now that I'm thinking about it, because that's the Atlantic. But that's the area in New Hampshire where I grew up. That's where my entire family's from. We play a game called 45s, which is very central to Merrimack Valley culture. Neurodiversity. This is a symbol for the for being neurodivergent. As someone who identifies that, I find that that movement, that culture is important to me. It's important for me to represent that culture, and it's important for me to understand that culture for individuals who don't have my privilege. And then spirituality. I don't necessarily believe in, I don't have a religion. I've been agnostic most of my life, mainly because I grew up with Reformed Catholics. And that could be something that indirectly affected me because what I saw growing up was a lot of Catholic guilt. So I have a very negative view of religion, but then I started to embrace this idea of there being a larger power. And that's something that influences my own actions. So I thought I created this for myself using PowerPoint. You do not need to do that. That is an option, but that is your discussion board activity. You can always draw it and take a picture. The iPhones have a scanner. There are other scanner apps also. Scan the picture and then post it to the discussion board. I just want to know what your own systems are. If you can understand how your own ecological systems work, you can apply that to other people. All right, so now let's go back to the PowerPoint. And then this is where I got ahead of myself. This is a more advanced ecological system where we have all these other systems, the individual, the and here you can see exosystem mass media is part of a lot of these because they also interact with each other. But attitudes and ideologies. I think there's something to be said about an attitude and ideology of being part of media, but it is more of an indirect influence. This also includes social welfare services. So I would say an obvious part of this could be, here's one. Because my partner is part of the National Guard, his children are, he receives subsidies for childcare. Those types of services are part of my exosystem because they do indirectly affect my ability or our ability to pay for childcare, though it's less important. It's less important at this point where they're both in school. What I want to pay attention to is the chrono system, and it's looking at the environmental events and transitions over the life course. And the idea being that these arrows and this kind of cylinder that was created is the idea that all of these things interact with one another, and they interact with one another at different points in time, and those interactions lead to different changes in development. Whew, a lot, right? But it also takes into account maturation and that there are these genetic influences that occur at different points in our lives, that we are supposed to grow. That we are supposed to develop more sophisticated thinking because of how our brains are developing as we're getting older. But it's also taking into account, like, there are these different pieces that are also going to affect brain development, that are going to affect development of other areas. I'm gonna next week kind of show another video about this, but think of this as kind of your introduction. But also, I don't like to say, does this theory explain atypical development? Does this theory explain cultural deviations from developmental milestones? I'm going to tell you, kind of, yeah. This is one of the best theories we can use, especially when you've got your cultural competence cap on, because it's forcing you to look at every single factor that could be influencing that individual, from immediate to, or from direct to indirect, from physical or tangible to attitudes and ideologies. That's what we need to know. And if you can understand this particular theory well, you'll have such a better ability to understand your clients and students in your school from that cultural competence perspective. So I'm going to end that there. It's a lot to take in when we're talking about Bronfenbrenner and ecological system because it's so layered and why we're going to come back to it. I wanted to kind of end today with a fun video highlighting people of color, highlighting some also cultural issues that adults face. And I think I didn't know this comedian. Apparently he's on SNL and I feel worse, but I don't watch SNL. But he talks a lot about his experience as a Cuban Dominican young man.
What's up, baby?
All right, there's an inappropriate joke at the beginning that we cannot listen to.
Opportunities. It's very interesting to be as Hispanic as I am and then to look this white. My name is Marcelo Andre Hernandez Gonzalez, but I look like Timothy Chalamet, okay? I look white, dude. I look like a white TikToker. I look like my parents make a bunch of money and I make even more money. Just with a tripod in my room, just every day. That's what I look like. I look white, dude. I look like I tell my mom to shut up. I could never do that. I could never do that. I have a Cuban mom that escaped communism, okay? The only reason I know that is because she told me every morning. So I don't know how you woke up in the morning, but for me, it's good morning, Marcelo. Have a great day, but just remember, I free you. She's a scary woman. In my house, you can't have a bad day. When your mom escapes communism, you can't have a bad day. You get home from school, you're like, Mom, I had a bad day at school. She's like, what happened? What happened that was so bad? Did somebody steal your freedom today? I don't understand. It's tough, dude. Communist parents. She's scary. It's tough when your parents are immigrants. They make you feel bad about everything, you know? It's their job. That's what they do. And I never knew what I was gonna tell my kids, you know what I mean? What am I gonna look at my kids and say? It was tough. It was tough when the Uber didn't get there. You probably don't even know about Uber Pool, do you? No, but now, with the pandemic, your boy got a struggle story, okay? Are you kidding me? I cannot wait to look at my kids and go, you don't know what it's like! We didn't have toilet paper! And I'll lie, you know what I mean? I'll lie. My parents probably lied to me, you know? I'll lie, I'll tell my kids, I'll be like, you know, the pandemic was from when I was 3 years old to when I was 25 years old. Then one day, you know, your kid will look at you and he'll go, Papi, I don't like the taste of the soup that you make for me. I can't wait to look at my son in the eyes and go, oh yeah? Well, I couldn't taste for 22 years. So maybe eat the soup. I grew up with those people my whole life in Miami, and then I went to college in Cleveland, Ohio, which is where the whites have a stronghold right now. And it was interesting. I got to school, and I remember being one of the only Latinos there, and I took their little Spanish test, and I tested out. It was too easy. And then I thought to myself, like, because they said you don't have to take a Spanish class, I thought to myself, I've never been the smartest kid in any class in my whole life. So I took a Spanish class in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was the best decision I've ever made. Oh my God, I walked into this class. The teacher's name was Megan Thornton, okay? I walk into this class, she's like, hola, estudiantes. I was like, she sucks. This is gonna be awesome. She got the first kid to introduce himself to the class. He came up with so much confidence. He was like, hola. Mi nombre es Jake. And yo soy from Cincinnati. And mi comida favorito is pizza. And I swear to God, my teacher looks at Jake and goes, Jake, that was incredible. And something came over me. I don't even know what happened. All I know is that as soon as Jake stopped talking, I went, bitch, watch this. She picked me, and the only way I can describe how this felt is like, have you guys ever seen a jazz musician? Like when the beat is just too strong. She was like, Marcelo, por favor. I was like, yo me llamo Marcelo Hernández. Y yo soy de Miami. Y mi comida favorita es arroz con frijoles con plátano maduro. Y también me gusta el pollo empanizado, por favor, al final. And then Megan goes, did you guys hear that? That is your new teacher, okay?
All right, the rest is a little inappropriate, so we'll stop. But I like this because, one, it provides kind of an insight. What is it like to be someone who, one, represents a diverse minority group, who has two parents, two immigrant parents, from different groups, Hispanic and or Latino groups, you know, one Cuban, one Dominican, and then talking about his experience, which I think this is probably much more familiar to younger kids than anyone, of being in this Spanish class, or what I've seen a lot of English as a second language classes, as a Spanish speaker, and having an extremely white teacher. I mean, that's the whitest name you're going to see, right? Or one of. Um, and that teacher just not knowing as much as you do. I can only imagine what that is like, but I think it gives some perspective. I'm sure, well, I don't know, if you are someone who identifies the same way, if this is similar to your experience, I would love to know. But I do think it's good. I want to highlight entertainers who represent these backgrounds that we're talking about. I love it because it gives me a perspective into, you know, I love stand-up comedy in general. Part of why I love it is it gives me a perspective into other people's very unique lives. I'm not going to say it'll all be stand-up comedy, though it might be a lot, but I think highlighting these people who are providing these really great insights into their lives is part of how we begin to really better understand diversity, how we develop cultural competence. We start to understand these unique perspectives that we do not have and could not have. Okay, so that's today's fun video. So let's wrap up as per usual. What did we talk about? We reviewed and we discussed what the doll video means for child development and greater society. Children are sponges, and take in more information from their world than we would even know. We talked about trauma and the developing brain, in that trauma has lasting impacts that we would only know through close relationships with students. We talked about theories. We talked about sociocultural theory and the importance of social context on thinking and language development. Then we talked about ecological systems, importance of the global or broader context, impact of societal attitudes, ideologies. And honestly, that speaks a lot to the video about those children are more reflecting society's beliefs of good and bad and beauty, not probably their immediate family's beliefs, right? Not their microsystem. This is another reason why I do like ecological systems. And then we talked, we highlighted entertainer of color. And you know what? I forgot, I did not go over that little piece about being a passing white individual, but it's something I know quite a few people endure. And what I say to that is like, as someone who has now recognized that there is a tendency to ignore those parts, that really we need to build up those identities and explore them more. So someone might look white, but pay attention to their story. If there's more to it, explore it with them. Yeah, so that's what we did today. And that's all, folks. Complete your exit ticket on Blackboard when you're finished. Awesome.